Hey guys, William here, aka Big Bastard. So, this obviously, as you can tell from the title, isn't dealing with Flat Earth, isn't dealing with theism or anything. But I figured that I would take a few moments to address something that yesterday I come across trolling on YouTube videos. And when I say trolling, not in the traditional sense we might expect from me, but you know, perusing through the videos, and I come across a video that had featured Boogie, and he was talking about the phenomenon of feeders, talking about the kind of address the big is beautiful movement, which, like Flat Earth, I had heard about this and thought it was just going to go away because, well, I'll address some of the reasons why in this video, but started watching some more videos of the guy who had hosted Boogie, and I don't remember his name, which is horrible. But he had addressed the big is beautiful and showed a talk show with he showed a Cosmopolitan cover with an extremely morbidly obese female model, and they had discussed that, and then saw somewhere else a show with two morbidly obese women discussing Big is Beautiful against, and I don't remember if she was a health expert or psychologist, I can't remember, but discussing against her. Okay, now, I've been having some personal issues in my life recently because of my weight. My health has deteriorated to such a condition that sometimes it is literally impossible for me to get around the house by myself without severe pain and without mobility issues. And, a lot of people point at me and talk about how disgusting I am and what a pig I am. And, you know, I've defended various issues concerning morbid obesity, but one thing I cannot and will not ever, ever, ever condone is for anybody, I don't care how obese or thin you are, to say that a morbidly obese lifestyle is something to be not only accepted but praised, because that is the other height of lunacy, and anybody who is morbidly obese to the levels that I am and that Boogie was will tell you that this is not the way you want to live your life. And if you do want to live your life this way, then I'm sorry, I'm going to be blunt. You have severe mental issues that need addressed. Because this is not living, this is being trapped in a body that is going to ultimately destroy you. And a lot of, one of the gals on the show that I was watching, made the argument that we need to separate weight from health. Well, in some ways you can. In some ways that is an acceptable mentality, but that only gets you so far. For the longest time, I had perfect blood panels. I don't know what my blood panel is right now, but even when I last took it, which was years ago, excellent blood profile. Lipids, my LDL was low. Unfortunately, my HDL was also low. A lot of people who don't know HDL, a low HDL can be just as much of an indicator of cardiac issues as can high LDL. But it wasn't terribly low, and it was about the only issue other than my triglycerides, and my triglycerides are going to be high. anyway, just because my triglyceride, basically, for those of you who don't know, and this is basically the way a doctor explained it to me, my triglycerides basically measure your body fat. It literally measures the amount of fat in your body. And that may be a simplistic explanation, but that was what I was told. So that makes sense for a morbidly obese person to have a significantly high level of triglycerides. But even factoring for my BMI, I was told that was not much higher than, high enough to be of concern. Now, I want you guys to understand this very clearly. And what I'm going to address here is I'll flat out say it's disgusting, and but I feel it's something that needs to be addressed, because you need to see the ugliness that the condition of obesity is. I'm not saying that obese people are ugly, but the condition of obesity is very ugly. And I would even go so far as to say it is a disease. And, a lot of people might argue that. Oh no, it's a lifestyle. You choose that. And I'm not going to run that argument right now, because the most important point that I agree with detractors of obesity, even those who make fun of obese people as much as I hate it, because I don't think you should ever make fun of someone who looks a certain way. So, for example, you take that hiker that made news headlines because he was so courageous, because he cut off his own arm. And a lot of people, if you were to go and you were to judge that man for how he looked because he inflicted that injury on himself, a lot of people would be like calling you out for being a monster and a barbarian. And many of you are sitting there and saying, well, there's no comparison because he did that to save his life. And without playing devil's advocate and going the role of a lot of trolls, well, you don't know that, how can you prove that, blah, blah, blah. Basically flat earth arguments. Without going that ridiculous route, I want you to understand that for a lot of people, eating is a coping mechanism that classifies it as a mental disorder. Anytime you use an addiction to cope with your life, that is classifiable as a mental disorder. And even if you don't want to go with this example of the man who cut his arm off, well, do you sit there and do you make fun of anorexics? Because by your logic, they're making a choice to do that. Oh, well, no, that's a disorder, that's an eating disorder. Well, now you see my point. That's exactly the same thing. A person who does not eat has a mechanism of coping with the demands of that person's life. A person who does not eat has a mechanism of coping to achieve a ridiculous body image that has been presented in Hollywood as desirable. That person has a mental disorder. A person who eats to cope with stress, a person who eats to cope with perhaps negative feelings or emotions, that is a mental disorder. And I can break out the textbooks, the psychology textbooks. Hell, I can pull up the DSM-5 and show you how it's classified as a mental disorder. But right now, I want to get to the important part of, hopefully, anybody that thinks the big is beautiful, hopefully this very intimate discussion of some of my disabilities and my issues will open your eyes to just how disgusting and hideous that is. And, I'm really. People. I generally try not to be this open about my life, about certain things, particularly things that are personal. But people need to understand this, that this is not a good thing. This is not a way that anybody should want to live. Because even if you can dodge the bullet, you can only dodge it for so long. And for those of you claiming that big is beautiful and that you don't have any health problems, first of all, by the laws of physics, you have health problems. You have a tremendous amount of weight bearing down on a structure that is not designed to carry that much weight. Even if you want to argue that, if you can climb up 5 to 10 flights of stairs without huffing and puffing, without stopping for a break, okay, you might have something there. But I want you to show us how you can do that without any splicing of footage, without any cutting, because it will be caught. And if you can sustain that argument with some form of evidence, then congratulations, because all that does is make you an exceptional example of something that should not be possible, but that does occur every now and then. I have been obese ever since I was little. And fact is, even when I couldn't make any decisions for myself as a baby, I was morbidly obese. And at some point, we talk a lot of people talk about issues of control. So, an obese person can control the environment around one. An obese person can control what goes into his or her mouth. And at the end of the day, that's true. It doesn't account for any number of variables, and I am by no means justifying this. But I'm just saying it's not as simple. Weight loss in general is not as simple as people make it to be. And being the exception to that, it's, again, my argument is it's only going to last so long, even if you are an exception that can prove that you defy the laws of mass and can do all these things. Because when I was younger, I was very active. I was always riding bikes. I was always out with my friends doing shit. And I believe that's why my blood profiles were so good, even as long as they've been. I believe that's why I have an ability to generally retain muscle mass. And I know that should not be possible, but I have always maintained a certain amount of muscle mass, particularly around my legs and my upper thighs and that. And if you think about it, when you exercise, you're reinforcing that, but when you stop exercising, there is still the weight bearing down on those portions of the body. And I believe that's probably overall what's helped retain that muscle mass that I did gain, and then, you stop working out. So just because of my weight alone, I don't lose muscle mass like a normal person should. That's still by no means a benefit. Because eventually, like I say, eventually it catches up with you. And to give you an example of how bad being this obese is, and, I don't know what the case is for guys like Boogie. A lot of people don't really address these kind of extremely personal elements that don't. This is not something you throw out proudly on the internet or for people to see. But because it is so crucial to make people understand this, I think it is worth doing, and I think it is worth addressing. So, even I will discuss this very candidly. It is disgusting, and a lot of people, hopefully, if you know me, you won't hold this against me, because a lot of people just look at something that's been said, and particularly if you know the person, you can't disassociate that from the person you know. And I do have a lot of people, well, I have a lot of people who know me. I don't know how many ever come across these videos, but I do know that I have 2 friends that generally check my videos out. And, again, I'm only doing this because I feel it is so important to address. And I will be very candid, and I hope that does not. I hope it offends people, but not to the extent that if you know me, that you try to distance yourself from me because of this or whatnot. Because it is, again, critical to address. And so now that I've given that warning, and anybody watching can walk away at this point, I will tell you that just because even when I was in my healthiest years, I can't even remember, I think past the point of 350 pounds is when this issue started. And what would happen is when I would go to the bathroom and I would defecate, I could not properly clean myself. I would literally have to lean against a wall to get my arm behind enough to clean myself properly. And, that's disgusting. That's hideous. How could a person let oneself get to that point where you're so debilitated that you actually have to use a physical structure to aid you in your daily living chores? And that was the only problem I really had for the longest time when I was past the 350 mark, and eventually you adapt to it, and you don't tend to think about it. At that time, it wasn't quite the struggle that it is now. And, another good example, if you can't see in my past videos, I mean, Jesus Christ, I sound like fucking Orson Welles filming his last movie. And for those of you who don't know, there's a story behind this. And when Orson Welles did the voice of Unicron in Transformers the movie, his condition was so debilitated, his health was so bad, that they could not use the original audio. They had to doctor it. But if you listen really closely, you can hear just how sick he was. And if you can find, and I encourage you to do this, if you can find an unedited clip of that dialogue with Orson Welles speaking, then by all means listen to it, because that is inevitably where this leads. And yes, Orson Welles was a smoker. I'm a smoker. But it's not like there's no involvement of obesity in these conditions. It's not like smoking, yes, is stupid. Smoking does not generally lead to any good outcomes in your health. Once again, it goes back to dodging the bullet. How long can you dodge a bullet? Orson Welles, when he filmed that last um, segment for Transformers, when he filmed his dialogue for Transformers, that's the sound of a dying man. And if you go to my videos, you hear that, then automatically you have to realize that this should be an alarm bell, and it is, and I'm trying to address it. And that should be a definitive cause of concern for anyone. So, I just want to say, and I don't know if anybody's quite put it this way, I think Boogie did, but in the end, I'm going to sum up with this: big is beautiful movement is bullshit. It is, what people need to understand is you don't judge a person's beauty by how that person looks, but you do judge the associated condition, has the documented, verifiable health concern that it is. Obese people are not ugly, but obesity is very ugly. And it will be the downfall of our nation if it continues unchecked. Right now, we're at an epidemic level of obesity in the United States. But there are justified fears that morbid obesity will become a pandemic. And the thing is an epidemic is a above average prevalence of a disease in a given region or nation. A pandemic is an above average level of this disease on a worldwide scale. And once that happens, and we're living longer with all sorts of cancers, not just lung cancer, but all sorts of cancer. By the way, lung cancer is the number one killer of people of any type of cancer. It's the second most prevalent, but it has the highest mortality rate of any cancer. Think about that. So for any of you smokers watching this, that's something else that needs to be addressed. Because anybody with common sense should know, smoking is not good. And morbid obesity is not good. And we're living longer with conditions with all these cancers. We're living longer with all sorts of CHD conditions, coronary health disease conditions. But that doesn't mean we're living better. And at some point, these epidemics and hopefully not becoming pandemics will, and I do believe that the cancers and the smoking issue is pandemic. But at some point in time, they're going to outweigh, no pun intended, the benefits we've had through the longevity of life. And really, when you get down to it, is that any way to live? Because I'm going to tell you from personal experience, that's not how you want to live your life. If you've gotten this far, thank you. And I want you to really think about it. Big is not beautiful. Obesity is not beautiful. It's a disease. It's a mental disease. And if you've gotten this far, thank you very much. I hope this message impacted somebody somewhere. And this is Big Bastard, and I'm signing out. I'll catch you guys later.